The call came at 2:47 a.m., the kind of hour when nothing good ever follows. Chidi pressed the phone to his ear, still half lost in sleep, and heard Emeka's voice crack with something between terror and disbelief. "You need to come, now, don't tell anyone. Just come." Emeka was a gateman at the Okafor estate in Ikoyi, one of those sprawling compounds where old money lived behind walls high enough to block out the rest of Lagos entirely. In 15 years of night shifts, he'd never called Chidi about anything more urgent than a generator failure. This was different. The basement was accessed through the boys' quarters, downstairs that seemed to descend into something older than the house above. The air grew thick and stale, carrying the metallic tang of rust and something worse, neglect, maybe, or despair made manifest. Then Chidi saw him. The young man was chained to a metal bed frame, wrists raw from restraints, his expensive silk pajamas hanging off a frame that had clearly missed too many meals. But it was his eyes that stopped Chidi cold, lucid, intelligent, completely aware. Not mad, not dangerous, just trapped. "Azubuike Okafor," Emeka whispered, as if saying the name too loud might summon something terrible. "The son. You know who he is, yes?" Everyone knew. Nigeria's youngest billionaire, tech genius, the golden child, who'd made his first million at 19, and his first billion by 23. 3 months ago the family had announced he'd gone abroad for, quote, private medical treatment. The tabloids had whispered about drugs, about a breakdown, about scandals too expensive to let see daylight. No one had whispered about this. "Help me." Azubuike's voice was hoarse, but steady. "Please, they're keeping me here. My own family." Chidi's hands trembled as he pulled out his phone. One call to the police, and this ended. One call, and the most powerful family in Lagos would fall. One call, and whatever protection had kept him safe as a security consultant for the wealthy, would evaporate like morning mist. But walking away, leaving this man to rot in his own family's basement. "What do we do?" Emeka asked. Chidi stared at those chains, at that face that had smiled from magazine covers, and felt the weight of a choice that would change everything. Chapter 1. The scream came from beneath the earth itself. Kwame had been checking the generator behind the boys' quarters when he heard it. A sound scraped raw, barely human, rising through the floorboards like something clawing its way out of hell. His hands froze on the fuel cap. In Lagos, you learned to mind your business, especially on Senator Okoro's compound where the walls had ears and the gates had tongues that wagged to the wrong people. But some sounds you couldn't unhear. The basement door was hidden behind stacked paint cans, its lock broken from the inside as if someone had tried to escape and failed. Kwame descended stairs that reeked of copper and rot, his phone's flashlight cutting through darkness thick as cloth. Then he saw him. The man was chained to an exposed pipe, wrists rubbed to bone, his body a canvas of deliberate cruelty. The gunshot wound in his thigh had been left to fester, edges blackened with infection. Machete cuts across his back had been packed with something, dirt, maybe, or worse, to prevent healing. Blood pooled beneath him, still fresh, still spreading. Kwame's stomach lurched, but his hands moved anyway, muscle memory from years he'd tried to forget. Boko Haram had taught him many things in those camps, and one of them was how to keep dying men alive, just long enough. He pressed his shirt against the worst of the bleeding, fingers finding the pressure points automatically. "Stay with me. Stay awake." The man's eyes cracked open, intelligent eyes, fever bright, but focused. His lips moved, forming words in Igbo so soft, Kwame had to lean close. "Don't. Call police. Senator owns them. All of them." "Who did this to you?" "The senator." A wet cough, blood flecking his lips. "My own uncle." Kwame's hands stilled. He looked closer at the face beneath the wounds, at the bone structure that even suffering couldn't fully disguise. Recognition hit like a fist. The newspaper photo had been everywhere 3 months ago. Tech billionaire missing. Emeka Nwosu's family fears kidnapping. "Jesus Christ," Kwame whispered. "Not here." Emeka's grip on his arm was surprisingly strong. "He's not here. Just you. Just me. And a choice." Outside, car doors slammed. Voices carried through the night, the senator returning early from Abuja. Kwame stared at the chains, at the blood on his hands, at the locked door at the top of the stairs. Every instinct screamed to run, to forget, to survive the way he'd always survived. But some sounds you couldn't unhear. Some choices remade you. His fingers moved to the chains. Chapter 2. Kwame had just found the key, a rusted thing hanging on a nail behind the water heater, when the basement door exploded open. Chidi Nwosu descended the stairs, like divine judgment made flesh, his Ermenegildo Zegna suit somehow remaining crisp, despite the hour, despite the fury radiating from every calculated step. Emeka's cousin, the senator's right hand, The man whose Harvard MBA had been framed and mounted in the estate's main hallway, like a trophy kill. Step away from him. Kwame's hands froze on the lock. He needs a hospital. He's dying. The blow came faster than thought. Chidi's fist connected with Kwame's jaw, sent him sprawling into the concrete wall hard enough to crack his vision into stars. Before he could recover, hands seized his collar, lifting him, slamming him back against the damp stone. Who will believe you? Chidi's breath was mint fresh, his voice MBA smooth even in rage. A gateman with a primary school certificate against a Harvard graduate. Against a senator's family? Kwame tasted blood. People will ask questions. People ask questions every day in Lagos. Then they stop asking. Chidi's grip tightened, expensive rings cutting into Kwame's throat. Your mother, Grace Ediemi, yes. St. Nicholas Hospital, Ward 3, Stage 4 cervical cancer. Chemotherapy is expensive. Would be tragic if her treatment suddenly became unavailable. The world tilted. You wouldn't. Your sister. Blessing, isn't it? 12 years old. Queen's College scholarship. Smart girl. Would be a shame if something happened on her way to school. Lagos traffic is so dangerous. Girls disappear all the time. Kwame's knees buckled. Behind Chidi, Emeka made a sound. Protest or warning. But the chains held him fast. Poor people who talk too much disappear in Lagos. Chidi released him, stepped back, brushed invisible dust from his sleeves. Your mother, your sister. Accidents happen every day. Gas explosions, hit and runs, stray bullets from armed robbers. Who investigates? Who cares? He pulled out his phone, showed Kwame a photograph. Blessing in her school uniform, walking through their Mushin neighborhood, completely unaware of the camera tracking her movements. You have a choice, Chidi continued, pocketing the phone. Forget what you saw tonight. Continue your job. Your mother gets her treatment. Your sister stays safe. Or, he glanced at Emeka's broken body. You can join my cousin in caring too much about things that don't concern you. Kwame's legs carried him up the stairs without permission, past Chidi's satisfied smile, into the Lagos night that suddenly felt too vast and too small at once. His hands shook so badly he could barely grip the gate to let himself out. Behind him, the basement door closed with a sound like a coffin ceiling. But Emeka's eyes, those fever-bright, pleading eyes, followed him into the darkness, branding themselves into memory like hot iron into flesh. Some things you couldn't unsee. Some screams echoed forever. Chapter 3. The pharmacy in Balagan Market didn't ask questions when you paid in cash at 3 a.m. Kwame counted out the bills. His mother's chemotherapy fund, 3 months of scrimping and saving, enough for one more round of treatment, and watched them disappear into the pharmacist's pocket. In return, black market antibiotics, IV supplies still in pharmaceutical packaging, bandages that might have fallen off a legitimate truck. You know how to use these? The pharmacist asked, eyeing him with the wary recognition of someone who'd seen desperation before. I know. He did. Boko Haram had made sure of that, teaching boys to patch each other up between raids, to keep fighters alive just long enough to be useful again. Knowledge bought in blood didn't fade, no matter how hard you tried to forget. The basement was worse than he'd left it. The smell hit first, gangrene sweet, infection ripe, the particular rot of flesh eating itself from the inside. Emeka lay in the chains exactly where Kwame had abandoned him. But something had changed. His breathing was shallow, rapid. His skin burned with fever that had crossed from dangerous into deadly, septic. Dying. Kwame's hands moved before his mind could catch up, before fear could freeze him again. He'd already made the choice when he spent his mother's medicine money. No turning back now. The IV line went in on the second try, his fingers remembering the angle, the pressure. Saline first. The body needed fluid before it could process anything else. Then the antibiotics, broad spectrum, strong enough to kill or cure. The machete wounds required debridement. Kwame used a razor blade sterilized in the pharmacy's cheapest gin, cutting away blackened tissue while Emeka's body jerked against the chains. The screams he'd expected never came. Emeka had gone somewhere beyond pain, floating in fever dreams where nothing could touch him. Dawn crept through the basement's single window, turning blood and sweat into amber. Kwame packed the cleaned wounds with antibiotic gauze, wrapped them tight, changed the IV bag. His back ached, his hands cramped. His mind played his mother's voice on loop. Kwame, where is the money for my treatment? He'd killed her. To save a stranger. To save a billionaire who'd never know his name. You came back. The voice was barely a whisper. Kwame's head snapped up. Emeka's eyes were open. Still fever bright, but focused now, seeing him. Why? Kwame's throat closed. He looked at the chains, at the wounds he'd cleaned, at the IV dripping life back into veins that had been ready to surrender. Because I know what it's like, he said finally, to be left in the dark. Emeka's fingers twitched toward him, stopped by the chains. Your mother's medicine money. I saw the hospital labels. How did you? The bills. They still smell like her perfume. A pause, each breath clearly costing him. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, Kwame said. Just don't die. That would make this really stupid. Something that might have been a laugh rattled in Emeka's chest. Outside, the compound was waking up. Soon the senator's household would stir. Soon Chidi would check the basement. But for now, in this stolen dawn, two men sat in the dark together. One chained, one free, both trapped by choices that couldn't be unmade. Chapter 4, Night 3. And Emeka could finally sit upright without screaming. Kwame changed the IV bag in silence, checking the wound sites with the careful attention of someone who'd seen too many infections turn deadly in the space between one sunrise and the next. The fever had broken yesterday. The gangrene had stopped spreading. Small victories in a war they were somehow still fighting. It was Chidi, Emeka said suddenly, his voice stronger now, edged with something bitter. My own cousin. Kwame's hands paused on the bandage. What? The tech empire I built. Niger Cloud, the data centers, the fiber optic networks across West Africa. Chidi always believed half of it belonged to him. We started together, you see. His Harvard connections, my coding. But connections don't write algorithms. Connections don't debug at 3 a.m. for 3 years straight. The words came faster now, pressure releasing from a wound finally lanced. When the company hit unicorn status, he wanted equal partnership, 50-50 split, for 20% of the work. I refused. So he went to our uncle, Senator Okoro, who'd been trying to buy access to Niger Cloud's surveillance capabilities for years. Every politician's wet dream, the ability to monitor every text, every email, every bank transfer flowing through Nigerian internet infrastructure. Emeka's laugh was acid. I kept saying no, so Chidi made him an offer. Help remove me, install Chidi as CEO, and suddenly the senator gets his surveillance state. Everyone wins. Except you. Except me. Emeka looked at the chains, at the wounds that would scar forever. They needed me alive long enough to transfer company access codes, offshore accounts, patent holdings. The torture was motivation and punishment. Chidi always did hold grudges. Kwame finished wrapping the bandage, sat back against the cold concrete. The silence stretched between them like a bridge being built from opposite shores. I was studying engineering, he said finally. Amadou Bello University, 2nd year, top of my class. Had a girlfriend who wanted to open a school, had a future that looked like something. Emeka waited. Then Boko Haram came through Zaria. Not the main raid, just scouts, clearing routes. But scouts still shoot anything that moves. Kwame's voice flattened, the way it always did when he touched these memories. They burned the engineering faculty, burned the hostels. We ran, those of us who could run, the rest. He didn't finish. Didn't need to. They took some of us, young men who looked strong, who might be useful. Put us in camps that moved every 3 days. Taught us to treat bullet wounds with dirty water and prayer. His hands flexed, remembering. 2 years of watching boys my age die from infections because we had no antibiotics. 2 years of being the one who decided who got the last morphine injection. Who was worth saving? How did you escape? I didn't. They released me. Too many questions. Too much thinking. Boko Haram doesn't like questions. Kwame's smile was ghost thin. Walked for 6 weeks to reach Lagos. Thought the city would be different. Thought the nightmares would stop if I just got far enough away. Did they? No. But at least here, the people doing the torture wear Zegna suits instead of black flags. Emeka's laugh was short, sharp, painful. Trauma is trauma, regardless of the uniform. Trauma is trauma, Kwame agreed. Outside, a generator coughed to life, the compound's morning routine beginning. Above them, somewhere in that sprawling mansion, Chidi was probably having espresso and reading the Financial Times, completely unaware that the cousin he'd buried alive was still breathing. We're both ghosts, Emeka said quietly. You died in Zaria. I died in this basement. The question is, what do ghosts do when they realize they're still here? Kwame looked at the IV drip, at the healing wounds, at the chains they still needed to break. They haunt the people who killed them, or they refuse to stay dead. Same thing, really. In the darkness of that Lagos basement, 2 survivors sat across Nigeria's brutal class divide, one who'd had everything and lost it. One who'd never had anything to lose, and recognized in each other the same essential thing. The stubborn, stupid refusal to let cruelty have the final word. The IV bag dripped. The wounds healed. The revolution began. Chapter 5. Night 5. And Kwame made a mistake. He'd attended evening service at the Redeemed Church down the street, a Wednesday ritual his mother had insisted on before Zaria, before everything. The pastor had anointed foreheads with oil that smelled of frankincense and myrrh, thick and cloying. The scent that was supposed to carry prayers to heaven. It was still on his skin when he descended into the basement. Emeka's color had improved. The wounds showed pink, healthy tissue at their edges. Another few days, and he might be strong enough to attempt an escape. Kwame was checking the IV site, calculating how much antibiotic remained, when he heard it. Footsteps on the stairs. Wrong rhythm, wrong weight. Chitty. Kwame killed his phone's flashlight, pressed himself into the shadows behind the industrial water tanks in the corner. The basement was large, a relic from when the house had been built in the 70s, designed to survive coups and civil wars. Plenty of places to hide if you knew the geography. Chitty descended slowly, phone flashlight sweeping the darkness. He stopped at Emeka's chains, studied his cousin with the detached interest of a scientist observing an experiment. You look better, not a question. An accusation. Emeka said nothing. Someone's been treating you. Fresh bandages, IV line. Very professional. Chitty crouched, examining the medical supplies with Harvard-educated precision. Then he inhaled sharply. Interesting. Anointing oil. Redeemed Church uses that particular blend. There's only one branch within walking distance of this compound. Kwame's blood turned to ice water. So, Chitty stood, turned in a slow circle, flashlight probing the shadows. Someone from the evening service. Someone who has medical training. Someone foolish enough to risk everything, for a man they barely know. The light swept past Kwame's hiding spot, missing him by centimeters. I could search all night, Chitty continued, voice conversational now, almost amused. But I have a better idea. He pulled out his phone, made a call. Yes, it's me. I need information on all staff members, living within 2 kilometers of the estate. No, focus on anyone with possible medical background. Yes, I'll wait. 30 seconds of silence. Kwame's heart hammered against his ribs so hard, he was certain it would give him away. Perfect. Send me everything. Chitty's smile was audible. Kwame Okafor, former ABU student, Boko Haram displacement, known first aid training. Mother, Grace Okafor, stage 4 cancer, at UNTH Enugu. Sister, Chioma Okafor, 15 years old, community secondary school, 9th mile. He began reading aloud, each word a nail in a coffin. Mother's room number, 247. Sister's class schedule, Monday through Friday, 7:45 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Route home, takes the 9th mile bus, walks the last kilometer alone. Kwame bit his tongue hard enough to taste copper. I won't search for you tonight, Mr. Okafor, Chitty said to the darkness. I know you're here, I know you're listening, and I know you understand what I'm telling you. He crouched beside Emeka again, spoke loud enough to carry. Your family is insurance. You run, they pay. You talk, they pay. You even think about going to the police, and your sister never makes it home from school. He stood, brushed dust from his trousers. But keep my cousin alive. Keep him healthy. Because the moment he dies, your insurance policy expires. The moment he's worthless to me, your family becomes worthless too. A pause. Do we understand each other, Mr. Okafor? Silence. Darkness. The smell of anointing oil heavy in the air, like a prayer gone wrong. Good. Chitty climbed the stairs. I'll be checking on my investment regularly. The door closed. The lock clicked. Kwame waited 10 minutes before emerging from behind the tanks, legs cramping, lungs burning from held breath. Emeka stared at him with eyes that held too much understanding. Your mother. Your sister. In Enugu, 4 hours away. Kwame sank to the floor. I thought distance would keep them safe. Distance doesn't matter to people like Chitty. Money travels faster than cars. So I'm trapped. We're both trapped. Emeka's chains rattled as he shifted. The difference is, now we're trapped together. Above them, the compound settled into night. In Enugu, a mother slept in a hospital bed, unaware of the invisible crosshairs painted on her room. A sister studied for exams, unaware that her walk home from school had become a death sentence, waiting to be triggered. And in a Lagos basement, 2 men sat in darkness, bound not by chains but by something worse. The knowledge that love makes hostages of us all, and family is the weapon no one can dodge. Kwame's hands shook as he changed Emeka's IV bag. The anointing oil still clung to his skin, its promise of divine protection feeling more like mockery with every passing second. Some prayers heaven never answered, some darkness God never touched. Chapter 6. The signet ring was older than Nigeria itself, gold worn smooth by generations of Nwosu hands, engraved with an eagle that had seen better centuries. Emeka worked it off his swollen finger with difficulty, held it out to Kwame like a grenade with the pin already pulled. Quillock's nightclub, Victoria Island. Thursday nights, Adeyemi Williams holds court in the VIP section. Emeka's voice was steady despite the fever that still came and went. Show them this ring. Tell him, Na anyi na ekpere. Our father is praying. I don't speak Igbo well enough. You don't need to. He'll understand. Emeka pressed the ring into Kwame's palm. Adeyemi was my grandfather's houseboy, grew up with my father. When I made my first million, I made him CFO. When everyone said a former houseboy couldn't handle corporate finance, he proved them wrong. Kwame stared at the ring, at the weight of trust and desperation it carried. What if Chidi has people watching? What if, then we're already dead, and it doesn't matter? Emeka leaned back against the wall, chains rattling. But if there's anyone in Lagos who'll burn the city down to save me, it's Adeyemi. He just needs to know I'm alive. Quelox on a Thursday night was another planet. Kwame stood across the street, watching Range Rovers and G-Wagons deposit their cargo of beautiful people. Women in dresses that cost more than his yearly salary. Men in casual wear that whispered rather than shouted wealth. The bass line from inside the club made the pavement vibrate. Gatemen were invisible in places like this. That was the trick. He crossed the street with the confidence of someone who belonged nowhere, and therefore could go anywhere, the signet ring burning in his pocket like stolen fire. The security at the door, massive men in black, earpieces gleaming, looked through him at first. Then he pulled out the ring. The change was instantaneous. The nearest security guard's eyes widened, hands shooting to his earpiece. Where did you get that? Adeyemi Williams. I have a message. Stay here. The guard spoke rapidly into his mic. Words Kwame couldn't catch over the music. 30 seconds later. Come with me, now. They didn't take him through the main entrance. Instead, a side door. A back corridor that smelled of expensive alcohol and cheaper perfume. Stairs climbing to where the real Lagos conducted its business away from the performance of the dance floor. The VIP section was dimmer, more intimate. Leather couches the color of dried blood. Bottles of champagne that could feed a family for months sitting casually on ice. And in the center, holding court like a chief at council, Adeyemi Williams. He was older than Kwame expected, late 50s, gray threading his close-cropped hair, but his suit was Savile Row perfect. His watch caught the light like a small sun. He was laughing at something when the security guard whispered in his ear. The laughter died. Adeyemi's eyes found Kwame, dropped to the signet ring in his outstretched palm, and something in his face cracked open. He stood so fast his champagne flute shattered on the floor, ignored it completely. Where? One word, hoarse as prayer. Senator Okoro's compound. Basement, he said to tell you. Kwame's voice dropped. Na anyanek bear. Adeyemi's hand flew to his mouth. His eyes, wet now, disbelieving, never left the ring. He's alive. Emeka is alive, barely. Chained, tortured. But alive, sweet Jesus. Adeyemi grabbed Kwame's shoulders, hard enough to bruise. How long? I found him 6 days ago. Been treating him. But Chidi knows. Has my family as insurance. And Chidi. The name came out like a curse. That Harvard bastard. We all knew. Suspected. But the senator, had the police, had everyone. We couldn't prove. He was pulling out his phone, already making calls. Thursday night. Good. Senator is in Abuja until Monday. We move tonight. Midnight. I'll have a team. Mr. Williams. Kwame's voice cut through the planning. Chidi threatened my mother. My sister. In Enugu. If anything happens, nothing will happen to your family. Adeyemi's grip tightened. You have my word. The word of a former houseboy, who never forgets debts. He turned to his security. Get this man food. Water. Keep him here until I return. The VIP section emptied rapidly. Phone calls made in rapid Yoruba and Igbo. Men in expensive suits transforming into something harder, more dangerous. Lagos had many faces, and Kwame was finally seeing the one that ran beneath the glamour like voltage through wire. He didn't notice the phones. 3 of them, scattered casually on nearby tables. Recording. Streaming. Sending video to accounts that reported to other accounts, that eventually, inevitably, reported to a Harvard MBA, who never left anything to chance. By the time Adeyemi Williams's convoy of blacked-out SUVs left Quelox at 11:47 p.m., Chidi Nwosu had already made his own calls, already repositioned his pieces, already turned Kwame's desperate gamble into the spring of a trap that was even now snapping shut. In the basement, Emeka listened to the silence and prayed his grandfather's ring would be enough. In Enugu, a mother slept in her hospital bed, unaware that men were already driving toward her room. In Victoria Island, Kwame ate jollof rice he couldn't taste, and watched the clock tick toward midnight, toward rescue, toward the moment when trying to save someone would cost him everything. Some victories are really defeats wearing better clothes. Some escapes are just different cages with prettier bars. The night had one more lesson left to teach, and it was written in blood and betrayal, and the kind of choices that break men into something new. Chapter 7. Midnight came with the kind of silence that precedes violence. Kwame led them through the compound's shadows, Adeyemi's team of 4 ex-military contractors, moving with the quiet efficiency of men who'd done extractions before, in harder places, under worse odds. Emeka between them, weak but mobile, one arm slung over Kwame's shoulder, the other gripping Adeyemi's. The service gate was 100 meters away, the gate where Kwame had worked for 8 months, checking IDs, waving through delivery trucks, invisible to the wealthy who passed through. Chitty had chosen the location deliberately. Symbolism mattered to Harvard MBAs. 30 meters. The night air was thick with heat, and the smell of night-blooming jasmine from the senator's gardens. 20 meters. Emeka's breathing was labored but steady. The wounds had healed enough. The antibiotics had done their work. They were gonna make it. 10 meters. Then the world turned white. Headlights erupted from every direction. Trucks. SUVs. The senator's entire motor pool arranged in a perfect killing circle. 30, maybe 40 men materialized from the darkness, assault rifles and machetes catching the light. Not police, not military. The senator's private militia, the kind Lagos whispered about but never proved, existed. And standing at the center, immaculate in white agbada despite the hour, Senator Okoro himself. Chitty beside him in a bulletproof vest over his tailored shirt, phone in hand, smiling the smile of a man who just won a game everyone else was still learning to play. "Did you really think," the senator's voice carried across the compound like Sunday morning sermon, "that I wouldn't monitor Quillocks? That I don't have eyes everywhere money flows in this city?" Adeyemi's contractors had already formed a protective circle, weapons drawn, professional. Trained, outnumbered 5 to 1. "Chitty sends his regards," the senator continued. "Also his compliments. Using the signet ring was brilliant. Emotional. Effective. It almost worked." He nodded to his men. "Kill them all. Make it look like armed robbery. This is Lagos. These things happen." The first shot came from Kwame's left. What happened next happened in the space between heartbeats. In the terrible compressed time, where bodies move faster than thoughts can follow. Emeka shoved Kwame down, hard, desperate, the last strength in his healing body. The machete that would have split Kwame's skull took Emeka across the shoulders instead, opening flesh to bone. Then the bullet, center mass, punching through his chest like divine judgment. Emeka went down, stayed down, blood spreading in a pool that reflected the headlights like black mirror. Kwame screamed, a sound torn from somewhere deeper than lungs, and then Adeyemi's contractors opened fire. The compound became hell's own orchestra. AK-47s chattering, pistols barking, the wet meat sound of bullets finding flesh. The senator's militia had numbers. Adeyemi's team had training. Men fell on both sides, screaming or silent, the mathematics of violence playing out in blood and brass casings. Then the service gate exploded inward. 3 more SUVs, Adeyemi's reinforcements, the ones he'd positioned outside in case of exactly this betrayal. 12 more contractors, these wearing body armor, that said they'd done Lagos before, that said they knew how Nigerian politics really worked. The tide turned. Senator Okoro was already moving, his agbada billowing as he ran for the main house. Chitty followed, vest flapping, Harvard intelligence finally understanding that money couldn't stop bullets if you stood still long enough. "Fall back." Adeyemi's voice cut through the chaos. "Get Emeka. Move, move, move." Kwame had Emeka under the arms, dragging him toward the shattered gate, leaving a blood trail that looked black in the headlights. Emeka's eyes were open but unseeing, his breathing wet and rattling, the sound of punctured lungs trying to inflate against blood. "Stay with me," Kwame was saying. Or maybe screaming. Or maybe praying. "Stay with me. You don't get to die. Not after everything. Not after." They made it through the gate, into the Lagos night where sirens were already wailing. Too late. Always too late. The police arriving only after the rich had finished killing each other. Adeyemi's lead SUV was an armored Lexus, doors already open. They threw Emeka in the back, Kwame climbing in after, his hands immediately pressing against the chest wound, against the machete cut, trying to hold a man together who was coming apart in all the ways that mattered. The convoy screamed through Victoria Island, running red lights, scattering late-night traffic. Someone was on the phone with a private hospital, the kind that didn't ask questions, that treated gunshot wounds with the same discretion as plastic surgery. But Emeka's pulse under Kwame's fingers was fading, a drumbeat, slowing toward silence. "Don't you dare," Kwame said. "You hear me? Don't you dare die on me now." Emeka's lips moved, no sound, but Kwame saw the words they shaped. "Thank you." Then his eyes rolled back, and the pulse stopped entirely, and Kwame was screaming for the driver to go faster, faster, knowing with the certainty of someone who'd watched too many men die that fast wasn't going to be fast enough. Behind them, the senator's compound burned. Someone, Adeyemi's team, or the militia, or Lagos itself, had decided evidence needed erasing. Flames climbed into the night sky, turning smoke into amber ghosts. At the service gate where Kwame had checked IDs for 8 months, 3 bodies lay cooling in the shadows. In Enugu, Kwame's mother slept on, unaware that men with orders to kill her had turned back when the phone call came that the plan had failed. And in the back of an armored Lexus racing through Lagos at 120 kilometers per hour, a gateman performed CPR on a billionaire, counting compressions in Igbo because it was the only prayer he remembered, because 30 compressions and 2 breaths were the rhythm of refusing to let death win. Some nights change everything. Some choices you can't take back. This was both, and the consequences were just beginning. Chapter 8. The safe house in Lekki Phase 1 didn't look like safety. It looked like money trying to hide itself behind 12-foot walls and bougainvillea that bloomed blood red in the morning sun. Dr. Okonkwo had operated for 6 hours in a converted guest room that smelled of antiseptic and desperation. The bullet had missed Emeka's heart by centimeters, collapsed 1 lung, fractured 2 ribs. The machete wound required 63 stitches and would scar in a way that made sure he'd never forget the price of survival. But he was alive. Kwame had watched from the doorway, still wearing clothes stiff with Emeka's blood, unable to move or speak or do anything except count each breath the monitors confirmed. When Dr. Okonkwo finally emerged at 6 a.m., exhaustion written in every line of his face, he'd simply said, "He'll live." Shouldn't. But will. Should have been enough. But Kwame's phone had buzzed at 6:47 a.m. with a video. Chidi's thugs. Outside his family compound in Enugu. Watching. Waiting. 3 men with that particular Lagos swagger that said they knew how to make problems disappear. Adeyemi had 2 of his contractors on a plane to Enugu within the hour. His mother arrived that evening. Grace Okafor, wrapped in a church wrapper in confusion, pushed in a wheelchair by men who looked like they ate violence for breakfast. Chioma walked beside her, 15 years old and furious, her school uniform replaced by jeans and a t-shirt that said Queen's College, across the chest like armor. "Kwame, what is happening?" His mother's voice was thin, cancer-weak, but her eyes were sharp. "These men came to the hospital, said you sent them, said we were in danger." "You were." Kwame knelt beside the wheelchair, took her hands. Mama, I need you to trust me. Just for now, please. Did you steal something? Are you in trouble with?" "He saved someone," Adeyemi said, emerging from the main house with the quiet authority of money that didn't need to announce itself. "Your son saved a life. Unfortunately, that life belonged to someone powerful people wanted dead." Grace looked between them, her gateman's son, this stranger in a suit that cost more than her house, the armed men patrolling the compound perimeter, and something in her face shifted. Recognition, maybe. Or the terrible understanding that comes to Nigerian mothers who've survived civil war and corruption, and know exactly how the powerful crush the powerless. "How bad?" she asked simply. "Bad enough that you can't go home," Kwame said. "Bad enough that they were going to hurt you to hurt me. Bad enough that..." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry." She touched his face, fingers trembling from medication or emotion, or both. "Is it right? What you did?" "I don't know." "Then we pray it was." She looked at Adeyemi. "This house is yours? It belongs to the man your son saved. Emeka Nwosu." "The billionaire?" Chioma spoke for the first time, voice sharp with Lagos street smarts, that came from navigating a city that ate the naive. "The one who disappeared? Newspapers said he died." "Newspapers lie," Adeyemi said. "Would you like to meet him?" Emeka was awake, barely, when they entered the medical room. Monitors beeped. IV lines ran like lifelines. His chest was wrapped in bandages that were already showing spots of red. But when he saw Chioma, he smiled. Tried to sit up, failed, settled, for lifting one hand in greeting. "You must be the sister." His voice was hoarse, oxygen deprived. "Kwame talks about you. Says you're the smart one." "He's the one who works as a gateman," Chioma shot back, then flinched, glancing at her brother apologetically. "Was a gateman," Emeka corrected. "Now he's the reason I'm breathing. Your brother is why I'm alive." He paused, each word clearly costing him. "He's the bravest man I know." Chioma stared at Kwame, her brother who'd failed out of university after Boko Haram, who'd disappeared for 2 years and come back broken, who'd taken a job opening gates for rich people because it was all he could find. Seeing him suddenly through different eyes, hero eyes. "You could have died," she whispered. "Yeah," Kwame said. "But I didn't." "You could have let him die." "Yeah, couldn't do that either." Grace was crying. Silent tears that said she understood better than her daughter the cost of the choice her son had made. In Nigeria the powerful didn't forgive. They waited. They remembered. They destroyed you when you thought you'd finally escaped. "So what happens now?" Chioma asked, 15 years old and smart enough to know that safety was temporary, and rich men's promises lasted exactly as long as their convenience. Adeyemi pulled out a folder. Legal documents, typed and notarized, with the weight of preparation behind them. Now we go legal. Federal High Court. I've already briefed 3 of Lagos's best lawyers. We're filing Monday. Unlawful detention, attempted murder, corruption charges against Senator Okoro and Chidi Nwosu. They'll kill you before you get to court, Grace said flatly. This is Nigeria. The powerful don't go to prison. Usually. Adeyemi's smile was shark thin. But Emeka has something they don't. What? Evidence. Every email, every bank transfer, every surveillance video from NigerCloud servers showing Chidi and the senator planning this. He looked at Emeka. You backed everything up, didn't you? Paranoia is just preparation wearing a tinfoil hat. Emeka's laugh turned into a cough that brought up blood. Dr. Okonkwo rushed forward, but he waved him off. 3 offshore servers. Switzerland, Singapore, and Iceland. Encrypted. Already sent access codes to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the International Criminal Court, and, another cough, the New York Times. You didn't, Adeyemi breathed. I did. If anything happens to me now, it all goes public. The senator's offshore accounts, Chidi's embezzlement, the surveillance state they were building. Emeka looked at Kwame. Your Gateman brother taught me something. Sometimes the only way to fight power is to make yourself too expensive to kill quietly. Outside, Lagos hummed with its usual chaos, traffic and generators and the eternal struggle of survival. Inside this Lekki compound, a family that had been fractured by violence sat together in a room that smelled of antiseptic and hope. Chioma moved to stand beside her brother, took his hand, said nothing, because words couldn't hold what she was feeling, pride and terror, and the dawning realization that heroes weren't people who had no fear. They were people who were afraid and did the right thing anyway. Federal High Court, Monday morning, Adeyemi said. We make this public. We make this loud. We make it impossible for them to make you disappear. And if they try anyway? Grace asked. Emeka smiled. Despite the pain, despite the machines keeping him alive, then at least the whole world will be watching when they do. In Ikoyi, Senator Okoro stared at the burnt remains of his compound and made his own phone calls. To judges he owned, to police commissioners he'd bought, to the machinery of Nigerian power that had never failed him before. In Victoria Island, Chidi Nwosu watched news of the fire and calculated odds with Harvard precision. The evidence was out there now. Too late to hide, which meant the only option left was to destroy credibility faster than truth could travel. Monday was 3 days away, 3 days for both sides to prepare for a war that would be fought not in basements or compounds, but in courtrooms and newspapers, and the court of Nigerian public opinion. 3 days for a gateman, a billionaire, a cancer patient and a 15-year-old girl to stand against the full weight of Nigerian corruption. Some battles you fight because you'll win. Some you fight because losing quietly is worse than dying loud. This was the second kind, and everyone in that safe house knew it. Chapter 9. The shareholder meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the Lagos Continental Hotel. Neutral ground, 5-star safety, the kind of place where billion-naira deals happened over coffee that cost more than most Nigerians earned in a week. Chidi had planned it perfectly. Emergency meeting to address, leadership vacuum, sympathetic board members already bought, votes secured. By noon, he'd be CEO of NigerCloud, and Emeka would be legally dead. A footnote in tech industry obituaries. The conference room was full. 30 shareholders, lawyers in Italian suits, investment bankers whose eyes tracked money like predators tracked blood. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Victoria Island, the Lagos skyline glittering with wealth and possibility. Chidi stood at the head of the table, PowerPoint ready, Harvard confidence radiating like cologne. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to address the tragic disappearance of Emeka Nwosu and ensure NigerCloud's continued. The doors opened. Emeka walked in, not rolled, not carried. Walked, slowly, painfully, leaning on a cane, but upright. Alive, very publicly, very visibly, very impossibly alive. The room went silent in the way that catastrophe demands. Mouths open, phones frozen mid-scroll. Someone's coffee cup hit the floor and shattered, and no one looked down. Behind Emeka Adeyemi, folder of documents thick as a Bible. Behind Adeyemi, 6 EFCC agents in their signature windbreakers, faces professional blank in the way that meant someone important was about to have a very bad day. Sorry I'm late, Emeka said, voice carrying despite the oxygen his lungs still struggled to process. I was indisposed. Chained in a basement, being tortured by my cousin and uncle. Chidi's face went through emotions too fast to track. Shock, calculation, rage, and finally the terrible smoothness of a man deciding which lie to tell first. Emeka, thank God, we thought. Where have you been? We've been searching. Liar. Emeka's cane hit the marble floor like a judge's gavel. You knew exactly where I was. You put me there. That's absurd. Why would I? The conference room doors burst open again. This time, 12 more EFCC agents, federal police, and the room seemed to shrink. Senator Okoro himself, hands already in cuffs, his white agbada replaced by the wrinkled suit of a man who'd been arrested before dawn. The lead EFCC agent, a woman whose ID badge said Director Amina Bello, held up a warrant with the casual confidence of someone holding 4 aces. Chidi Nwosu, you're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted murder, embezzlement, and about 17 other charges I'll read when we get downtown. This is a mistake, Chidi said, but his voice had lost its Harvard polish. I have lawyers. I have evidence, Director Bello finished. Yes, we know, so do we. She nodded to Adeyemi, who opened his folder like a priest opening scripture. 3 offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Adeyemi read. Total, 420 million naira, embezzled from Niger Cloud over 18 months. 12 payments to militia groups. 47 emails coordinating with Senator Okoro to install surveillance backdoors in Nigerian internet infrastructure. And, he pulled out a USB drive, security footage from the basement, showing you personally supervising Emeka's torture. The shareholders were already standing, already edging toward exits, already calculating how fast they could distance themselves from this catastrophe. In Lagos, you didn't stay in rooms where EFCC made arrests. Proximity was contagious. Chidi looked at his uncle, Senator Okoro, who'd built a political empire on corruption and intimidation, now in handcuffs, diminished to just another criminal in an expensive suit. Then back to Emeka, who was watching him with eyes that held something worse than hatred. Pity. I gave you everything, Chidi whispered. Partnership. Opportunity. Respect. You wanted what you didn't earn, Emeka said quietly. And when I wouldn't give it, you tried to take it. That's not partnership. That's theft. The EFCC agents moved forward. Chidi didn't resist. Harvard had taught him many things, but fighting armed federal agents wasn't on the curriculum. As they cuffed him, he looked past Emeka to where Kwame stood in the doorway, still wearing the security uniform that marked him as invisible to people like Chidi. This is your doing, Chidi hissed. A gateman. A nobody. You destroyed everything. No, Kwame said. You destroyed everything. I just refused to help you hide the bodies. The trial took 6 months. Federal High Court, Lagos. Every day, news cameras caught Chidi and Senator Okoro arriving in prison transport, their fall from power, playing out in real time, for a Nigerian public hungry for the rare sight of the powerful actually facing consequences. The prosecution had evidence that would have convicted them 3 times over. The defense had expensive lawyers, who billed by the hour, and accomplished nothing. The verdict was inevitable from opening arguments. Chidi Nwosu, 25 years, Kirikiri maximum security prison. Senator Okoro, 30 years, plus asset forfeiture that stripped him of mansions, cars, offshore accounts, and the political machinery he'd spent decades building. But the real sentence, the one that hurt worse than prison bars, came from the family. The Nwosu clan held council, elders in their 80s, aunties who remembered everyone's business, uncles whose word was law in Igbo communities across Nigeria. They sat in judgment in a family compound in Enugu, no lawyers present, no appeals allowed. The verdict, NDIMMUO, ghost people. Chidi and his father ceased to exist in family memory. Their names struck from genealogies. Their children, if they ever had any, would carry the stain forever. In Igbo culture, where family is identity and community is survival, this was death of a different kind. Worse than prison. Prison you could survive. But being erased from your own history, that was eternal. The night after sentencing, Emeka found Kwame on the safe house veranda, staring at Lagos lights that went on forever. I almost killed him, Emeka said quietly, lowering himself into a chair that his healing body still protested. In that conference room, when I saw him standing there, lying with that Harvard smile, I wanted to put my hands around his throat and squeeze until he stopped breathing. Why didn't you? You. Emeka looked at him, watching you in that basement, risking everything, refusing to let torture be the final word. It taught me something. Violence is easy. Justice is hard, but justice is what separates us from the people who put us in chains. Kwame said nothing for a long moment. Then, he'll survive prison. Men like Chidi always do. They adapt. Maybe. But he'll survive knowing that a gateman brought him down. That money, and Harvard and family connections weren't enough. That's the thing he'll never escape. Emeka's smile was sad. We take victory where we find it. Is that what this is? Victory? We're alive. They're not free. Your family is safe. Niger Cloud stays clean. By Nigerian standards? Emeka laughed, pained but real. This is practically a miracle. Inside the safe house, Grace was teaching Chioma how to make egusi soup, the way her grandmother had taught her. Normal things. Healing things. The sound of women laughing drifted through the open window like blessing. What happens now? Kwame asked. Now. Emeka considered. Now we rebuild. I return to Niger Cloud. Adeyemi runs operations. And you? He pulled an envelope from his pocket, held it out. You finish what Boko Haram interrupted. Kwame opened it. Inside, acceptance letter to University of Lagos, engineering program. Full scholarship, housing stipend, medical coverage for his mother. I can't. You saved my life. This is the smallest thing I can do. Emeka stood, joints cracking, scars pulling tight. Besides, Nigeria needs engineers who understand that building things matters more than stealing them, who know what it means to choose right when wrong is easier. He extended his hand, not employer to employee, not billionaire to Gateman, but the simple gesture of one survivor to another. Kwame took it. Somewhere in Kirikiri maximum security, Chidi Nwosu lay on a concrete bunk and stared at ceiling stains that looked like maps to nowhere. His Harvard degree was ashes. His family name was erased. His future was measured in decades of walls and bars, and the slow realization that corruption only works until someone decides it doesn't. And in a Lekki safe house, a former gateman and a rescued billionaire shook hands, while Lagos hummed its eternal song of survival and second chances, and the stubborn refusal to let darkness win. Some stories end in prisons. Some end in justice. The lucky ones end in both, and leave room for new beginnings. This was one of the lucky ones. Chapter 10. 2 years later, the Bridge Foundation headquarters rose from reclaimed swampland in Yaba, glass and steel that caught the Lagos sun and threw it back defiant, a building that said "We belong here" in the language of architecture. The grand opening drew crowds that spilled into the street, not just the wealthy in their imported suits, but the people the foundation had been built for. Domestic workers in their Sunday best, Okada drivers who'd parked their bikes blocks away, market women whose calloused hands had held the city together long before anyone thought to notice. Inside, the atrium held photographs, faces, stories, transformations. Amina Ibrahim stood before her own image, before and after, the universal language of survival. In the first photo, 22 years old, eyes downcast, wearing the uniform of a housemaid who'd learned to make herself invisible. In the second, standing in front of Lagos High Court, holding a settlement check, shoulders back, meeting the camera like an equal. He believed me, she told the crowd gathered for the dedication, her voice carrying the kind of confidence that comes from being heard after years of silence. When my employer, a bank executive, when he touched me, when he threatened my job if I reported, everyone said, "Who will believe a maid?" Mr. Kwame said, "I will." She gestured to the woman standing beside her, another domestic worker, then another, a dozen of them forming a constellation of dignity reclaimed. Now we run a cooperative. 300 domestic workers. Fair wages, contracts, legal protection. We teach each other. Your work has worth. Your voice matters. Your silence is not the price of survival. The applause was thunder. Tunde Adebayo went next. Okada driver whose bike had been destroyed in a hit and run by a senator's son, who'd been offered 2,000 naira to forget it happened, to accept that some people's convenience mattered more than other people's livelihoods. Bridge Foundation gave me lawyers, Tunde said, grinning the kind of grin that had survived Lagos traffic and Nigerian injustice and come out sharper for the experience. Not pro bono, not charity. Justice. We sued. We won. And now, he held up his law school acceptance letter. I'm going to become the kind of lawyer who remembers what it feels like to be powerless. More applause. More stories. Grace Okonkwo, trafficked from Edo State at 16, promised housework and given hell instead. Rescued by a domestic worker who'd attended one of the foundation's training sessions and recognized the signs. Now, scholarship student at University of Lagos, studying social work, planning to return to Edo and build a support network that hadn't existed when she'd needed it. Each story a bridge. Each bridge connecting the powerless to power, the silenced to voice, the invisible to witnessed. Then Chioma took the microphone. She was 17 now, first-year engineering student at University of Lagos, wearing her Queen's College alumni shirt like armor and her brother's quiet courage like inheritance. Everyone wants to talk about my brother's bravery, she began, and the crowd quieted in that particular way that says someone's about to tell truth. About how he risked everything to save a billionaire, how he stood up to corruption, how he chose right when wrong was safer. She found Kwame in the crowd, standing at the back as always, uncomfortable with attention, trying to disappear into the wall the way he'd learned to disappear as a gateman. But that's not the whole story. My brother has what I call quiet power, not the loud kind that demands attention, not the flashy kind that needs recognition, the kind that sees suffering and can't look away, the kind that asks, "What if I'm the only one who will help?" And then helps. Her voice caught, steadied, 2 years ago, I was ashamed he was a gateman. Now I understand. He was already building bridges. Between the compound and the street. Between the wealthy who didn't see, and the invisible who were never seen. He was engineering human solutions, before he ever returned to study engineering. She raised her glass of Chapman. To Kwame Okafor, who taught me that knowing your place means knowing your power, and that real power isn't what you take. It's what you give. Later, Kwame drove alone to Zaria. Amadou Bello University looked smaller than memory. Or maybe he'd grown larger. The engineering faculty had been rebuilt after the Boko Haram attack. New buildings, fresh paint. But the ghosts still walked the corridors if you knew where to look. Professor Musa was older, grayer, but his eyes held the same sharp intelligence that had once pushed a second-year student to think harder, calculate better, build solutions that lasted. Kwame. He stood from his desk, embraced him, the way Nigerian professors embrace former students who've made good. I heard about the foundation. About everything. I always knew you'd do something important. I failed out, sir. After the attack, You survived. Then you thrived. That's not failure. Professor Musa gestured to a chair. Tell me, what are you building now? So Kwame told him. About the basement. About Emeka. About choosing to help when help was dangerous. About the foundation that had grown from one gateman's refusal to look away. Now employing 43 staff, serving thousands, replicating across Nigerian cities like a blueprint for justice that actually worked. When he finished, Professor Musa was smiling. You remember what I used to say about engineering? That it's not about the math. It's about the problems you choose to solve. And what problem did you solve? Kwame considered. I solved the problem of silence. Of invisibility. Of a system that works. By convincing people they don't matter enough to fight back. That, Professor Musa said, is the best engineering I've heard in years. Bar Beach at sunset. The Atlantic rolling in with Lagos's trash and dreams tangled in the foam. Kwame sat on a log with the people who'd become family through fire. And Mika on his left, still moving carefully but moving. Scars hidden under an African print shirt that said he'd stopped apologizing for surviving. Adeyemi on his right, semi-retired now, spending his days mentoring young CFOs and his evenings playing chess with Kwame's mother. Grace Okafor, 2 years cancer-free, her wrapper bright as hope, was arguing cheerfully with Kioma about whether engineering or social work did more good in the world. The kind of argument that had no winners, because both sides were right. A suya seller worked his way down the beach, meat sizzling, spices making the air smell like celebration. Emeka bought enough for all of them, waved away Kwame's attempt to pay. CEO of a foundation, Emeka said, biting into pepper-dusted beef. Look at you. From gateman to changemaker. I was always making change, Kwame said quietly. Just took me a while to realize it counted. 23 people employed at the foundation, Adeyemi added, pulling out his phone to show the latest numbers. 3,000 domestic workers registered. 17 legal victories. 4 new branches, opening across Nigeria. Not bad for 2 years. And it started, Chioma said, joining them with suya in hand. Because one person decided that another person's suffering mattered more than his safety. They ate in comfortable silence, watching Lagos's sunset paint the sky in colors that didn't apologize for being bold. The city hummed around them, generators and traffic and the eternal song of hustle. But here on this beach, in this moment, there was peace. Do you think it matters? Kwame asked suddenly. All of this. In a country where corruption is currency, and power is inherited, and the system is designed to crush people like us. Emeka considered, chewing slowly. Ask Amina Ibrahim if it matters. Ask Tunde Adebayo. Ask your sister, who's becoming an engineer because you showed her that gatemen can be heroes. Ripples, Grace said softly, surprising them all. She rarely spoke in groups, cancer having taught her to conserve energy for things that counted. You threw a stone in dark water. Now watch the ripples spread. Adeyemi raised his bottle of malt drink. To ripples then. And to the stubborn bastards who refuse to accept that darkness is permanent. They drank to that. To ripples and resistance, and the quiet revolution of one person deciding that no was a complete sentence to injustice. On the beach, children played football with a ball made of plastic bags and string. Market women packed up their wares. Okada drivers navigated the sand with the skill of people who'd learned to find paths where none officially existed. Nigeria, broken and beautiful, corrupt and incorruptible, a country where everything was impossible until someone decided to do it anyway. I've been thinking, Emeka said, watching the waves. About power. Real power. Not the borrowed kind that comes from money or position. You taught me something in that basement, Kwame. What's that? That power isn't what you can take from others. It's what you give to those who have none. You gave me my life back. The foundation gives voices to the silenced. And every person we help, he smiled, they become bridges themselves, teaching others, spreading ripples. So we're engineers after all, Kwame said. Always were. Just took you a while to recognize the blueprint. The sun dropped below the horizon, that brief Lagos twilight where day surrenders to night without much fight. Street lights flickered on. The city's second shift began. The night workers, the hustle after dark, the people for whom rest was luxury and survival was the only clock that mattered. Kwame stood, helped his mother to her feet, gathered the family he'd almost lost, and the family he'd chosen. Emeka beside him, no longer billionaire and Gateman but brothers in the ways that counted. Chioma walking ahead, engineering textbooks in her bag, already planning solutions to problems the world hadn't named yet. Ready? Adeyemi asked. For what? Tomorrow, next week. The next person who needs help. The next bridge that needs building. Kwame looked back at Bar Beach, at Lagos spreading behind them in all its chaotic glory, and Nigeria, with all its broken promises and stubborn hope, and felt something settle in his chest. Purpose. Direction. The certainty that his voice, silenced for so long in that basement, in those camps, in every gatehouse where he'd stood invisible, now amplified thousands. Yeah, he said. I'm ready. They walked toward the parking lot, toward tomorrow, toward the work that never ended, because injustice never rested. But neither did they. Neither did the domestic workers learning their worth. Neither did the Okada drivers demanding dignity. Neither did the thousands of Nigerians who'd looked at a system designed to keep them powerless and said, not anymore. From small boy Gateman to CEO. From know your place to I define my place. The Nigerian class system, that ancient machine of crushing the poor and elevating the connected, had met Kwame Okafor and discovered something it couldn't categorize. A man who refused to accept that his birth determined his worth. Who understood that moral courage was currency the wealthy couldn't buy. Who'd looked at a chained billionaire and seen, not opportunity but obligation. Power redefined, not by wealth or position, or Harvard degrees, by service, by sacrifice, by the simple, revolutionary act of choosing someone else's freedom over your own safety. Lagos lights spread to the horizon, each one a story, each story a choice, each choice a bridge being built or burned. Kwame chose bridges, and in choosing, taught a nation that the most powerful person in any room isn't the one with the most money. It's the one willing to risk everything for someone else's tomorrow. If you enjoyed this story, tap the like button. It really helps more people find the channel. For more powerful stories about hidden identities, shocking twists, and moments that change everything, make sure you're subscribed. Drop a comment and tell us what you think happened after the street froze. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next story.